Zeke Sanger, and he was a graduate, he is a graduate of Marist College, and in his senior year, in the history department, he wanted to do a senior paper, and at the place where he was residing, it turned out to be a very interesting history to the property, and it's the Bacon property, right here in Millbrook. So digging through, he found the story behind it, and I'm going to leave the rest to him. He has it totally under control, and we would like people to share their stories of the property at the end, if you have stories, and Zeke he'll lead you on that. Thank you, Zeke.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you all for being here today. A special thanks to Allison. When I started this project, I really wasn't sure where I was going. I remember the first question I actually asked her was, what's the difference between Millbrook and Washington? And which I'm sure is a question that comes up quite often. So she really helped guide me in a lot of my research, so we're very thankful. So here is Canoe Hill Farm, now known as Silverbrook Manor. It was occupied by a lot of interesting individuals over the last few hundred years. Here we see a photo on the left. This is from the 20th century, not sure exactly when. This was actually a part of the current, I want to say like private collection of the current owners. And here is a recent photo of the last 10 years. With a quick show of hands, has anyone here met Catherine LaSalle Bacon by any chance? A few hands here. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Has anyone heard of the Bacons who used to live in this property? Yes. We got a few hands. Okay, fantastic. For those of you who actually met Catherine LaSalle, I'll ask if you have any stories or can share some words. That'd be fantastic. So, my connection to the property. In my junior year, I realized while I was studying from home that I needed to go back to Marist to finish up my studies. In that time, there was an opportunity to live in a renovated space in one of the barns. So it was fantastic. It's a very beautiful property. These are, recent images. So it's fantastic. I realized also my senior year that I had to figure out a project. So I knew there was some history behind the property, most of which was surrounding Catherine LaSalle Bacon, who was a Broadway actress. So I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to maybe find out more about her acting career and what else she did in town. So my purpose is to kind of build upon the research that has been done before, kind of contribute to what is known, but also to learn more from you folks. I never had the chance to meet Catherine LaSalle. I'll never get the chance to. And I also know that I'm a visitor to Millbrook, and so I'm not sure what more I can learn. One of the things I want to note is that a lot of my research is guided by John Foreman's research. Most of the research was stuff that I was able to find in my own research. But unfortunately, there are no notes, there are no resources available. So something I'll talk about in a few slides is how I found information that doesn't align with what Foreman has. So it's hard to say how that happened. So for those of you not familiar, it's at the fork of the Sharon Turnpike. And you can see here on the top corner, there is Canoe Hill. And so that's kind of where the local area kind of got the name from. And as you're driving by into Millbrook, this is what you'll see. So, and as you can tell, it's only a few miles from downtown. The first person to own the area was William Creed. Here you can see the lot was lot 12. The blue marker kind of shows the creek. that kind of still now exists on the property. And you can see here the Canoe Hill. So David Lawton is one of the first people we know who actually lived and farmed on the property. You can see here he was a Quaker, and he was a part of the 9 Partners. And this is basically a letter from Rhode Island wishing the 9 Partners here to kind of welcome them with open arms. As you can see, he had a very large family, him and his wife Hannah. And here you can see some of the deeds. I think one of the notes that Foreman makes, and I'm not positive, but I believe there is like a molding that is supposed to signify the fact that the property was never mortgaged. So, but I'm not confident on that. I will note that there is a mortgage here, so I don't know if that is a difference between a mortgage of the land versus a mortgage of the house itself. But that was something interesting. Here, so we don't know a lot about the Lawtons, but there are some interesting findings. On the left, there was a notice about horse thieves, which was something that was causing a lot of distress. So David Lawton is one of the people who's agreeing, hey, I'll join the local task force fighting against these thieves. And then we see this article here from the Albany Plowboy, and it's basically talking about how Lawton purchased some property from a neighbor. The property was, the land was about like 20 acres, and it was dead. It wasn't able to grow crops. So one of his neighbors said, hey, why don't you buy it, see what you can do with it. In which case, he bought it for $5. At the end of the day, I think he pocketed 20. And 7 years later, after he had successfully cultivated the land, his neighbors asked for $50 so they can buy it back. And he said, sorry, I can't do that. So one of the things to note is that Lawton is kind of, when the house is sold, people recognize it as the property of the late David Lawton. And it's hard to understand his significance, but I'd like to think that it was his, ability to cultivate this land that kind of made a name for himself. One of the interesting documents that I did find, it seemed like David Lawton had signed a paper in which someone had gone missing. My ability to read this isn't very strong, and it looks like it may have been about one of the Hates, who I know is a well-known name in Millbrook in Washington. But I thought this was kind of interesting. I don't know if this means that he was involved with like the local I don't know what this means, but it makes me wonder if he had more to do than just farming. And here we see an ad in the paper for the selling of the farm. This is in 1834. And one of the things that you see over the course of the next 100 or so years are kind of the similar advertisement for the property. It says it contains about 160 acres of land suitably divided into meadow, plow, and pasture land with a good supply of wood, and is very pleasantly suited upon the forks of the Dutchess Turnpike Road, about half a mile east of Mrs. Gay's Tavern in the town of Washington, with comfortable buildings and a good supply of choice fruit. That seems to be almost word for word what a lot of the advertisements say as the years go on. So it makes me happy to know that the property was still sustained and enjoyed. In Foreman's history of the property, he doesn't have a lot on William R. Hazard. In fact, even Foreman doesn't even say when Hazard acquired the property. In my research, I wasn't able to find so myself. Here we have some interesting things. We have an advertisement on the left. It looks like at one point he was selling lozenges. And that was at the Hibernia Mills, not too far. We see here he got second place for Best Buck. And funny enough, Hates and the Haight family seem to be very successful. In fact, they win, you can't see it, but they are first in all the other activities. And then you can see a little bit of his family tree. So you see they are related to the Hogues here and some of the Haights as well. All right. And here is a photo of a census in which you could kind of see some interesting information here. I actually highlighted Seth Lawton, one of the sons, Stephen H. Smith, which is of the Smith family, who we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we have William Hazard here. Kind of share some interesting information. It says here, on the farm, it has a cash value of $10,000. The machinery is worth $300. There's 3 horses, a number of milk cows, possibly 10. There's two oxen, 50 or so sheep, etc. I thought it was interesting. They were able to sell 900 pounds of butter, which I thought was pretty impressive, as well as hay and other sorts of produce.
What year was this?
This is in 1850. So the next family to acquire the property are the Smiths, with Harris Smith as the head. As you can see here on the map from 1858, you can see him noted there. We also see S. Lawton, who I believe is Seth Lawton, one of David Lawton's sons. And here we have at the fair, again, Stephen H. Smith, best 2-year-old heifer. So here's some more information on the Smiths and who were living at the time. It says, funny enough, the house was worth $2,500. Harris Smith, he was born in Rhode Island. He was a farmer. He was widowed, and he never served. His son, who I believe was head of the house at this time, he was born in Dutchess. He never marries and he never served as well. And so one of the things that Foreman talks about is that the Smiths are related to the Smith brothers of Poughkeepsie. And unfortunately, I was not able to make that connection. And as you see here, this is the Smith family. This is the Smith brothers. It says the Smith family made its way from Scotland to Quebec, where William Wallace Smith and Andrew Smith were born. They moved to Poughkeepsie in 1847. Based on where the families came from, the Smiths who lived at Canoe Hill, they were from Rhode Island. And then you see here, this is when Henry Smith passes away. They note that the only person surviving them is Julia. So, and I think I'll talk about this again, but based on the Smiths who are part of the brothers and what I was able to find in this family, the connection doesn't seem to be there. The only question then is why Foreman was able to make that connection. So I'll kind of talk about how I think that was possible later. Then the property makes its way to Justice John W. Goff. He was there from 1905 to 1914. This is interesting because it's the first time where it looks like the farm was once called the White Farm. And again, 156 acre farm in Dutchess County. It includes a colonial dwelling and a private park. And it is one of the most beautiful in the country. All right. And as you can see, this was his summer home. in continuation with me thinking that it was not the Smith brothers who were the Smiths that lived on the property, here is an article in which it talks about Goff renovating the property, and he apparently stripped all of the inside, also added a wing, and he talks about how he was upset because he ended up paying a lot of taxes, and he thought it was unfair that he had to pay taxes for the improvement of his property. And he talks about how, well, if the other people didn't, take care of it, why should I be punished for restoring it? Which would go against the idea that the Smiths had renovated it, had made it kind of Victorian era. It leads me to believe that instead that was actually kind of Goff's decision and kind of Goff's preference. And just to build a picture of kind of the estate, Whitney Coons, who was the project manager, more or less, or the person in charge of the farm, it said he's building a small lake for the swans. And then we see here, William Vincent has a contract to remodel the house. And here we kind of see Goff apparently spent $3,000 to make the improvements. So this is actually a map from when Goff purchased the property. So you can see here, this is where the actual property is located. You can kind of see it has a lot of the elements that exist on the property today. You can see the barns, the tenant house, the main house here. You can see Route 44. Interesting, and what some people might not know, is that he actually owned the property on the other side of the road. So you can see over here, that is kind of where the building for one of, I want to say the Carey Institute, or yes. Over here, by the way, is also like where the creek is. And that brings us to the Bacons. And I should have prefaced before, this has nothing to do with Kevin Bacon. So the Bacons received the property in 1914. I have a picture here. On the left we have Wentworth Kruger Bacon, and then we have Catherine G. Bacon, who I must note is not Catherine LaSalle. This is his first wife. Catherine G. Bacon, she was actually a widow when she married Wentworth Kruger Bacon. The story is that she was in Paris. All these men were coming up to her, they were falling in love with her, and news comes out that Bacon is marrying her, and she's going to break all these guys' hearts. So I thought it was fun that we had this photo from around that time. Wentworth Kruger Bacon is very interesting because he comes from a lot of connections. One of his relatives is Washington Irving, who was very actively involved. He wrote Sleepy Hollow, so he's a well-known individual. He had a brother who was an American ambassador, and his father was a financier in New York. So one of the stories is that he was gifted the property for the wedding, or for their marriage. But unfortunately, his father had just recently passed, so it's possible that he gifted it before, or he had used the money that he received from his father's passing to purchase the property. I'll actually go back. When Bacon purchased the property, there's this funny article here. He sold one of Goff's white peacocks. I also share a few of these. He was a little unlucky when he first moved to the property. He lost 2 cows, as you can see here. There's another story where someone notes that there was dogs running through their property, and they ended up being Mr. Bacon's that had escaped. And this is hard to see here, but through my research, it looks like Mr. Bacon was he liked to laugh and he liked to make jokes. So there's this quote here, I think is making kind of fun of the Bacons. It says, "Mr. Bacon, are you through with that bonnet you were, Mr. Bacon, are you through with that bonnet you wore last winter, dear?" And Mrs. Bacon, "Why, yes." He asks, "May I have it?" She says, "I suppose so, but what do you want it for?" And then he says, "I want to use it on the scarecrow I'm going to put out in the cornfield." And so it makes me wonder, maybe one time there was a scarecrow with her clothes there. And these are a few articles just to show kind of, help understand what life was like for them. Here, you can see there was apples for sale on the property. He was a part of the hunt. That was something that he did growing up. In Massachusetts, where he's from, he actually was master of the hunt. He was an amateur jockey for a little while, and one of the things that he did in his free time was write articles about livestock and horses. We see all the way on the left, he actually put fish in the creek nearby along with the other neighbors. And that's something that later on, Catherine LaSalle's sister or niece, I can't remember which right now, she notes that Wentworth would actually go and fish in the stream. And on the left here we have Catherine G. Bacon. She's with Mrs. Jonathan Thorne. And as you can see, this is likely one of Wentworth's hounds. And in a lot of my research, I found articles like this. It says, "Prominent Americans are visitors in Paris. After a winter of extreme dullness, the drooping spirits of the keepers of the big Paris hotels were revived this week by the arrival of a few wealthy Americans." And so a lot of times in their travels, they were kind of followed if they were visiting friends in Rome, in England. Unfortunately, Catherine G. Bacon died at the age of 42. Foreman notes that it was likely due to alcoholism. One of the things I do know is that she was a widower. And something that I find interesting is that she doesn't have kids. So one of my thoughts was always wondering whether that had anything to do with maybe some of her sadness, that Eva was involved there. And then a month later, he sails for China. So in the meantime, this is Catherine LaSalle Carpenter, later known as Catherine LaSalle Bacon. The Catherine LaSalle you are probably familiar with. Here are a few photos in which they're advertising her as an actress. She was known for playing roles where she was crying, kind of like the damsel in distress. One of the things that was fascinating was that Foreman notes that she was one of the first women to successfully divorce her husband based on the argument of mental cruelty. And one of the things that I found extremely fascinating was this paper that said, "Give me back my character or pay $100,000. So during the divorce, Catherine LaSalle had made claims that her ex-husband, Mr. Carpenter, was basically fooling around with the maid. And the maid here is saying, "That's absolutely not true. Please rescind what you said. That way I can keep a job." And there are stories of, Catherine LaSalle shares of Mr. Carpenter coming home, asking the maid, "Hey, do you want walnuts?" And them enjoying it together while Catherine is enjoying food with friends. And as you can tell, they don't paint Catherine in a really great light. And as you can see here, they always call her pretty this, pretty that. I don't know whatever came of the case. it's possible that, you know, she did rescind the words and it was kind of dropped. So, and just to backtrack, Catherine LaSalle had a daughter, Patricia. When she divorced Mr. Carpenter, she actually didn't ask for, my understanding is that she didn't ask for any money. She was given sole custody and that was that. So, 2 years later she marries Wentworth Bacon. Not too long after Wentworth and Catherine LaSalle get married, unfortunately the daughter Patricia ends up passing away in a motor car accident. And I thought this was really interesting when I went and visited the Nine Partners Cemetery. I was fascinated at how large the Bonnecue stones were and how prominent they were in the local community. And so I thought this kind of connection was a little interesting. So unfortunately, the chauffeur of the Bonnecues was driving one of the Bonnecue daughters and Patricia, and when they saw a car in front of them, he swerved off the road, and unfortunately, the daughter was crushed in the accident. We do see here, Catherine LaSalle actually took them to court for $50,000 on negligence. Again, we don't know kind of what comes of this. Something really interesting is that about 10 or 15 years later, we actually see that one of the Bonnecues and Wentworth Bacon are actually playing golf together. So something tells me that some of this may have been kind of resolved in a sense.
What year was this?
I don't have off the top of my head, but I can tell you afterwards.
Excuse me, what newspaper is this?
This is all likely the Round Table. This might be either the Poughkeepsie Eagle or something else. That can definitely let you know. Here, you can see at this time when Bacon owns the property, it's valued at $15,000. We could see that Mr. Kuhn and then Jacobson were the kind of superintendents of the property. We can also see for Bacon, he just has listed general farmer. Catherine, at this time, she's a saleswoman within the grocery industry, which leads me to believe that maybe she was helping sell the apples on the farm. And then we see they do have one servant on the property. And here's another map, also very similar to the one that Goff had. And most interesting about the Bacons is his relationship to the president. I'm not sure to what extent they were friends, whether they saw each other every time he was in Hyde Park, or if they just knew each other because of their family relations. But on a handful of occasions, Wentworth Bacon wrote to the president and then the president wrote back. If you want, I'll give you a few seconds to look this over and see if you can decipher. This was in 1934. So I'm not great at deciphering this, so I'll share with you what I have. It says, a week ago Sunday I landed and played golf in Rome, where I had been for some time, with your ambassador Long and two of your captains from Paris. They send you regards and greetings in Hyde Park. He says, we are just about back to Millbrook to our farm. Shall be glad to see the hills at Dutchess County again. Which is one of my, which is a great line.
I lunched and played golf.
Yeah, there you go. Fantastic. I'll have to get your notes at the end here.
Just think about what I do.
And this is the president's response.
Could you read it?
Yeah, of course. It says, "Dear Mr. Bacon, many thanks for your note. I am glad you had a chance to see Brett Long, who was a member of his cabinet, and also to know that he is thinking of coming home for a vacation this summer. I hope to have the pleasure of seeing you this summer when I get back to Hyde Park. Very sincerely, yours." Here we have another letter written by Wentworth Bacon to the president.
What year?
This is also
Oh, so
34, yes.
We all know how busy we must be these days. For someday or afternoon, I should be honored if I might drop in for a moment to pay my respects.
You can take it away if you know the rest. This is one of the ones that I don't have.
I was 19, I don't know what that means, I was 1900 at St. Works, so now a lot of,
Yeah,
I
so,
went to Columbia.
yeah, so you're doing really well. He was saying he graduated in 1900 at St. Mark's, and then he went on to go to Columbia. Some of else what he says, I don't fully decipher, but I think he's basically inviting him to go to the Saratoga racetracks. Think of that. And unfortunately, I think because the president is so busy, this response is actually a response from the assistant secretary. They say, "My dear Mr. Bacon, the president asked me to acknowledge receipt of and thank you for your letter of September 20th. Unfortunately, it did not come to his attention until today, hence it was not possible to arrange the appointment requested. He was glad to have your comment with respect to Ambassador Long. He may have occasion to use it in a humorous way." So this leads me to believe that they were,
Johnny.
yeah, exactly. And this is in 1943.
Dear Mr. President, we all know that cattle are high on the farm labor question is the problem. But as a Dutchess County farmer, I hope you could try and persuade.
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Morgenthau, not to do something.
Yeah, you pretty much have it. In this letter, Henry Morgenthau, who was another one of Roosevelt's political friends. I can't remember if he was part of the cabinet or if he was an ambassador.
Treasury Secretary.
There we go, Treasury Secretary. And at this time, he owned a large farm. I think it was just across the river. And Bacon has basically gotten word that he's selling his cattle, and he thinks it's going to be for beef. So in this letter, he's reaching out to the president. He's actually asking, can you speak with Henry Morgenthau's wife, and maybe she can change his mind.
We need more milk.
And he ends it with, "We need more milk." And this letter he ends with, "I am, sir, sincerely yours." In most of the letters he says, you know, "I am sincerely yours" or "forever yours." So it seemed like this is his way maybe of trying to say, "I'm sorry for being so brash, but please understand where I'm coming from." And here we get a response from Roosevelt himself. He says, "My dear Bacon, I think all the arrangements were made by Morgenthau before he left for the sale of his cows, and it would be too late to stop it now. I am not worried about his cows being sold for beef. I think we can be assured that the purchasers will continue to use them for milk production. Also, it is my personal thought that Henry Morgenthau is not selling his cows because he was making a loss in the milk business. I think it was solely because of the fact that with his work here, he could not give as much attention to the farm as before.
It's 1943, right?
Mhm.
The war is raging, and they're working the milk and the
Yeah,
candy.
which, in some respects, yeah,
It's local, it's local.
one of the things,
That's what you just said.
Wentworth was actually, I think, chairperson of the like agriculture division in Rhinebeck at the time for the war, and so
The chairperson of our board in Rhinebeck,
yeah, and so it leads me to believe that this would have been of great importance to him. One of the things he talks about here is also farm labor, because they're sending so many men overseas. There's no one to care for the farms here. So one of the things that I always understand is that he was definitely a gentleman farmer. He loved to go abroad. He loved to travel, host parties. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, he was a farmer, and he, cared for the farming here in Dutchess County.
I don't think he had a Department of Agriculture in Washington at that time.
Within Rhinebeck,
No, I think, what I'm saying is I
Oh,
think it was
gotcha.
more local rather than national.
understood. Wentworth Bacon dies at the age of 78, I believe in the year 1953. This is actually, I think, in the Poughkeepsie Eagle. This is on the front page. And they basically talk about how he was a well-known member of the community. He was a part of many clubs, the Millbrook Hunt, golf and tennis. Kind of pay homage. In the years following Wentworth's death, Catherine LaSalle actually lives 30 more years. So these are some articles on her to help understand kind of what she was doing in that time, and in some ways the kind of person she is. On the left, the article is titled Lady of Porcelain. So at the time, she was actually collecting and selling porcelain from her home. I think she was kind of doing a little bit of antiquing. Here, she's part of this aid. She's also part of this another kind of sponsorship here. And this is a great letter. I don't think I have the full thing here, but it's a letter to the Times. And she's basically correcting them on a piece they did on, She's basically correcting them on a piece they did about Persian pants. And I like the idea that, that was her expertise. She was they traveled to Paris, they got married in Paris, and they spent a lot of time there, so this is just kind of a fun letter. And Catherine LaSalle Bacon would die in 1988. She had been a resident in Millbrook since 1929. One of the things, when her and Wentworth Bacon died, they asked for donations to be made to the Carey Institute, which was part of their property that they actually transferred to the Careys. Unfortunately, because of the passing of their daughter, there is no one really to tell their story. And so that's kind of why I'm here today, is to kind of, keep their story alive. And these are just a few more photos from the private, collection. We can see here the hunt on the left. You can see all the puppies. And I'm not sure if who the individuals are on the right, but I imagine one of them is either Wentworth Bacon or Catherine LaSalle, or a family. And so a lot of my history is on the property in the past. So these are just some photos of what it looks like now. The property is called Silverbrook. It's the Silverbrook Manor. One of the things I always thought was interesting was trying to understand how the name came about. And the only thing that I can kind of connect is that one of the owners of the last 20 years, their last names were the Silvermans. And so I imagine that that's how the name came to be. So.
Is that who owns it now?
No. And that is all. I wanted to take a second. I wanted to take a second. I know two people had said they knew Catherine LaSalle Bacon. So if you're comfortable or if you have a story, feel free to share. Or if not, I'll take, if anyone has any questions.
So we have, I don't know how, because we had, kind of did some estate work that took care of the property and stuff, and we had a house out there in the pasture, but this is near the end when she's 80s, when she was blonde, I think. I think she's blonde, and she's quite old. I thought she lived to be in the hundreds, but she was.
She died in 96, so
96, yeah.
almost.
So, and you talk about the stream, I remember there's like kind of like a pool, a little bit of a pool in that stream. It was very cold, but ooh, we loved, you don't have to work in the hay in the field, we go jump in there. But I don't, you know, I kind of sat with her a few times, and then my mom actually did there a little bit too, and so, and then when she died, I'm not sure how we got connected. My dad must have somehow had connections with Janet.
Okay,
Was
yes.
her niece, right?
Where's her niece? Yes.
Okay, she lived in Wheaton, Illinois, and it just so happened that my brother was going to college in Wheaton, Illinois. So when she died, Janet came out with a friend, she took care of all the stuff, and we took all her stuff. What she kept for herself, we took the lead. But I don't think Janet lived that much longer after Catherine died.
Yeah, my understanding is that when Catherine died, before that, her niece, Jeanette LaSalle, she actually had conservatorship over Catherine LaSalle. There's stories about her, Foreman talks about it. Apparently she would leave the property, have a suitcase with her, and you know, kind of walk down the road saying, oh, I'm supposed to be here, and the police would find her and, you know, bring her back home. So I think Jeanette LaSalle had the property for a few years as she was trying to sell it, but that's the extent that I know.
Yeah, can't say I met her, but I did go to her house. Mary DeGarris in Millbrook owned that antique shop in Washington Hollow, that church. And we went to the house, and Mrs. DeGarris bought boxes and boxes of china, glassware, small pictures, a lot of other small stuff. And I had to wrap it all and put it in boxes and load the car, but she bought a lot of her stuff there.
Gotcha. Do you?
I had tea with them once.
Yeah. What?
A long time.
At the house.
74.
Can you say what she was like, or maybe some of the things that you may have talked about?
She was very proud. I think the way with Sally over last year.
Well, they could have,
Because my family was always so It was so long ago, I actually hardly remember it. I just remember it was English porcelain, thin porcelain cups and saucers.
Was Mrs. Oberlin one of the teachers at Bennett College?
Was who?
Miss
Sally
Oberlin?
O'Brien.
Sally O'Brien.
Sally O'Brien. No, Sally O'Brien was, she was the neighbour, actually, of the Bacons. She lived in what's the Carey brick house, the one that's empty. It was her family's house then across from Gifford, Sally Gifford.
From any of this history, among anyone remembering her or having tea with her, did she seem like the sort of person who had people in frequently? Would she have teas frequently, or?
She
was
would have,
called court.
you know, it was like,
Oh, court.
like, you know, other people used to have, John, who was the person who always used to come round with, her uncle built Bennett College, who was that?
Ann Carter.
Ann Carter. She used to come round with, you know, visiting anybody who moved into town.
She got a lot of visitors.
Yeah.
I moved 35 years ago here.
So you lived in the barn, you've been in the house?
I have visited the house. The owners are really nice, really gracious. And I don't have any photos, but when you walk in, there's a beautiful staircase. The kitchen, the dining area, I think it maintains a lot of what it was 100 years ago. Unfortunately, I'm not an architect and I can't speak on it very well. But I want to say it has like the original, I don't want to say like tiling, but it's very beautiful.
I remember like the kitchen, very old fashioned, you know, I'm sure it's different now. But there's like a stairway going up, like a servant's quarters, kind of going up through the back of there.
Yeah, I actually did see like the entryway and like the stairwell. I think there are still the remnants of like the servant bell, but I'm not sure if it works.
wanted to give Zeke his undivided attention here, but we're the current owners of the
Yes,
house.
I'm
William, this is my wife Mindy, and yeah, it is a gorgeous property, and there's old linoleum from the 20s, which is stunning. And the old servants' quarters are still there. It's lovely. Yeah. So, well done.
Yeah, of course.
Linoleum from the 20s, is that like one sheet of linoleum or little pieces?
We've had some other architects in. It looks like a painted lacquer,
Yeah.
but some pieces have pulled up, and you can see the layering. So we think it's from like the first examples of modern day linoleum.
Oh, that's interesting, because I think I had some of that in the house I grew up with. We tried to meet quarters up in the attic.
Okay, yeah.
It sounds like sort of like painted in a large square.
Yeah, but there's intricate details. They had a
Yeah.
motif of, I don't know, like urns etched into
Yeah.
linoleum. They're kind of laid in pattern, so it's very ornate. But it's
Very
very
interesting.
And William's an interior designer, so we're working really hard to just preserve all the architecture and try to restore all the details as much as possible. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
And Zeke, I want to just also point out that we found in the attic floors all these handwritten bank registers and receipts of like garments from Paris. And we believe this is not from Catherine Lasalle. It was from the previous Catherine. That was confusing to us. It was Carpenter. So
Yeah.
you just solved some puzzles for us because we just keep finding more things under original wood floors.
They were under the floorboards in the attic.
Wow.
For some reason, stacks and stacks of bills of lading from
Hiding
Paris.
them from her husband.
Perhaps.
Or husband hiding from you from the wife.
They live in the bacon house.
There's a great article that I saw, I think it was in the Millbrook Roundtable, or the Poughkeepsie Eagle, but it was said, basically a woman left her scarf on the train coming back from New York. If anyone finds it, please let Catherine LaSalle Bacon know. So this
Is that
in
under the
line.
floorboards?
We're still finding things.
We're still finding.
And actually, there's one other anecdote that's really interesting, and it hasn't necessarily been proven, but you were mentioning when Catherine was in Paris, and she had that divorce with the very manipulative, her husband. And she was awarded the first divorce ever based on psychological grounds, which was groundbreaking at the time, very controversial. There was, theoretically, and this has been written about in some articles in local magazines and lifestyle magazines, there was a movie done in the 50s, and it was all about a famous actress who was an actress of stage and screen in Paris, had an abusive husband. He would lie, manipulate, And he would sneak into the house and spy on her and tell her all stories, and basically was convincing her that she was losing her mind.
Gaslight.
Gaslight.
Gaslight. So the term gaslight that we hear is so popularized now in
But it was
politics
about her?
is rumored to be about her, and there's other articles that
Wow.
Wow.
So yeah, so whenever you hear the term gaslight, it's linked to Catherine Nicholson.
That's a joke.
How did you get those letters? Where did you find them?
Yeah, so because they were so, I think, popular, and I don't want to say famous, but they knew a lot of famous people for sure. Like Catherine LaSalle, I think herself, she was famous. Wherever they traveled, there was always Mr. and Mrs. Bacon are in Rome. Mr. and Mrs. Bacon are, here. They had a lot of dinners with ambassadors. Breck Long, they met with him in Rome many, many times. So it was very easy to find that information online. The historical, the Hudson River Valley Historical Society, I believe that's where I found the roundtable articles. So I was able to look in and...
What are the letters from the president?
So when I started my research, Mindy had reached out to me, and she shared one of the letters from the president to Bacon about the milk. And it was amazing. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is gonna be great for my history class. And so I reached out to the FDR library, and I said, basically, can you do a search on Catherine LaSalle and Wentworth Bacon in Canoe Hill Farm? And lo and behold, they sent me a message that day saying, yeah, I found these like 10 papers. And there was a few more, I don't want to say correspondence, but at one point Catherine LaSalle had reached out to the president asking him to look into, I think it was her brother's like job at the time. I think he wanted to do engineering or something during the war, and she had reached out, kind of, can you do something about this? And at one point, the president has a note to the secretary saying, can you please do whatever you can to fix this? If not, just let them know, like, the process is what it is. So I think there's one other document kind of like that about that situation, but they were able to provide that. So.
Research. Well, I think that we should thank you. People can ask more questions, I'm sure. We've got to have a couple more.
Thank you.
And for present owners as well. It's very exciting, learning what's behind walls of houses here that we pass every day. And, we take places for granted, but the history of them is really neat.
Well, we'd be happy to host an event for the Historical Society there if anyone wanted to take a peek at some. It needs a little bit, maybe in time, if we're still doing some renovations. It was in a little bit of rush shape when we
Okay. Great.
the offer is there.
We're farming again.
I've seen that. Yes. I'd like to hear about that too. Thank you, everyone. Good job. Okay. Your neighbor